as part of the work that's going on health, representatives from education are sitting on some of those steering groups to try and make sure that the link across is there. So I have been in this post for about 6 months. Prior to that, I worked for the department for about 3 years, working on policy for vulnerable young people, so care leavers, young people with drug and alcohol problems, young offenders. And prior to that, I spent about 8 years working for voluntary organisations in that sort of area. So I was thinking, when I was thinking about what I was going to say today, this is the first time I think that I've spoken as a civil servant and not felt like I'd be better at home in the audience, not felt like I was kind of amongst a sector that I've known for the best part of a decade. And what that prompted me to think is how reliant I, and certainly I think the department, and I suspect local authorities are or should be, on that expertise and experience that you have, that you live every day. And I think looking at the new national network leaflet, that idea that your strength is your shared experience really, really rings true. As someone who has at best an intellectual understanding of the problems that you face, the opportunities, the reality, it's really, really valuable having that network to draw on. And I hope that ambition to draw on that expertise and to give parents and families more control came out really loudly and clearly when the Green Paper was published just over a year ago. Whether it was about control over the services, whether it was about the kind of the role of parent participation, whether it was about control over budgets, I think that was very clearly one of the main themes, the main drivers for ministers was giving more control to families. And 1 year on, with where things are up to with the Pathfinders, where changes to health policy, changes to education policy are happening, I think that that's still true. I think that almost all of the Pathfinders have very directly involved parent-carer forums or sought to involve parent carers, and that's something that we as a department continue to try and push and to drive and to work with Mott MacDonald and others to make sure that that really happens. That's easy to say, and I think when I used to sit in the audience of those sessions and civil servants used to come and say these sorts of things, I used to look for what the action was, what the evidence behind it was. And I think, going back to the Green Paper, at the time I was working in a very different area, and at the time when one of my budgets was cut by 80%, another budget cut much more heavily, the fact that the Minister committed to continue to fund parent-carer forums and committed over a fairly long period of time was really, really significant. I wasn't part of the SEN division at the time, but I think that underlines a real commitment to the agenda. This isn't just kind of a useful or a side aspect to the work. I think ministers really mean this, and certainly officials really look to draw on parental experience. And similarly, if you look around at the membership for some of these forums and groups who are deciding really significant aspects of policy at the moment, whether it's on health, whether it's on education and the Green Paper reforms, you'll find parent-carer representatives there, often through the national network. And it's not just a case of having someone on those groups. I've been in the rooms when those discussions happen, and people really look to the members who are there to share their experience and give quite a strong steer on whether something's appropriate or not. And when the imminent next steps document is published, and it's been imminent now for about 8 weeks, which I think is a Whitehall record, but it is nearly there, and it will be out very soon. We'll also be announcing the kind of structure for the ministerial advisory group, where ministers will get their policy advice and sounding board from, and parent carers will certainly be at the heart of that. So I hope that underlines some of the action behind the kind of the words of commitment. But at the same time, I am very aware, and particularly given the time that I joined, which was sort of last September, that those aims, those kind of ambitions for parent-carer engagements were undermined by the problems that a lot of forums experience with grant payments. And I know these cause huge frustration for many forums. And I also know, because the National Network told me in no uncertain terms, that some forums' work in some areas only really continued because people went above and beyond. So didn't take expenses, didn't take payments, made it work somehow. I'm really, really grateful for all of the forums for doing that. And I'm very sorry that actually you had to do it. I hope that the changes we're making this year means that the payment process will be much smoother. Hopefully you've seen the update about how it will work, but essentially the first chunk of payment isn't dependent on jumping through all of the hoops to check what was done last year. So you could apply from now to get your first tranche of payment and be planning for activity over the summer. And then the second payment can take account of any changes to plans last year in the same way as it would have previously. So I hope that makes a real difference and puts some practical stability on the work that forums do, because it, as I say, it is incredibly important and incredibly valued. And in planning that work, in thinking about what you're doing over this coming year, I don't think you can underestimate how important the links to health will be. So David Nicholson, who was the former chief executive of the NHS and now head of the NHS Commissioning Board, said that the health reforms were so big you could see them from space, I think. And they are huge. I mean, huge, huge changes. And actually, there are some real opportunities within some of those elements to link up education, health and care in exactly the way that the SEN and the Green Paper reforms are intended to do. Now, the National Network are very engaged, taking your expertise and your experience at a national level to make sure that happens. But the biggest theme of the health reforms is about making these services more locally driven. And I guess the question to ask yourselves is, if your local commissioning groups, if you're the local people deciding these services aren't getting their advice, aren't getting their expertise on the lives of disabled children, what it's like for families of disabled children from your forum, where are they getting it from? There'll be huge expectation and duties on commissioning groups on, I won't use the formal names because it becomes a bit of a list of acronyms, but the sort of clinical groups and the local authority health and wellbeing boards to engage users, to consult with people, to actually put their plans up for scrutiny. And now the danger is that those plans, that scrutiny, is carried out by people who have the time, who have the kind of the free time to commit to those sorts of activities, and that the views and the voices of disabled children, disabled families aren't properly represented unless we work together to try and make sure that that happens. And there's a willingness from Department of Health, from Department of Education to look at what we can do to support that. But in your planning, making sure that those local services are accountable, that you have those links, is really, really important. And I hope today will help understand how that process can start.